Hello everyone, my name is Friendzoned and welcome to the second episode of Friendzone Produces. If you don't know what this series is all about, basically anyone can fill up the form that you can find in the description to give me musical guidelines. I then read those forms and try to create tracks following those guidelines as best as I can. Today's track is called Lamentations, and those are the guidelines I will follow in the creation of this track. So the genre has to be an hip-hop beat, classical as well, and the mood of the track was supposed to be melancholic. So thank you so much to whoever suggested those guidelines. That person wished to stay anonymous. In any case, thank you so much. I first started with the genre, so hip-hop beat and classical. I interpreted it that the person wanted a hip-hop beat with classical elements to it. So when I considered classical elements and melancholic, I just had to find one sample that I could use, which came from a classical piece, and that sounded melancholic. And this is where it all started. So this is the classical melancholic sample that I decided to work with. It's a piece by Robert Schumann, Klosterfräulein, Opus 69. It's a beautiful a cappella piece and it sounds like this. I'm going to link it to the description because it's beautiful and you should really listen to it. So my goal with the processing of this sample was to make it consistent through and through. So I added lots of compression and some saturation to make the highs a bit crispier and to make the all-in-all volume quite equal. I then added some delay and a reverb, as well as a bit more volume with a utility. It sounds really harsh like this, but this is what I wanted in order to create the chops that I will talk about right now. So the main chop in the track sounds like this. And the easiest way to achieve this result is just to drag and drop the entire sample on another audio track just under it, and you use this audio track here as sort of a puzzle piece that you have to recreate. So you just listen to the entire sample. For example, say if I like this part, I can just chop it up on Ableton and drag it up there. And you do this for many different samples that you like using many different rhythms. So this is the technique I use to create the main chops here. Now the main chop sounded pretty good in itself, but it needed a bit more details and drive to it. So I decided to add as a build-up a very glitchy sort of lead that could build up to the drop. And it sounds like this. And the way I created this is that I just froze and flattened the sample here. So the main chop was turned into audio, and then I did the exact same technique. One audio track under it, and I used this one as a chopping board sort of, chose the parts that I really liked, and that's how I came up with this. Another little trick that I used was with Ableton's Beat Repeat. It's an audio effect that you can find right here. And basically what it does, if I just drop it here, is that it's going to chop up the audio at regular intervals and using a certain grid that you specify. Basically what I was trying to achieve were sounds like these. Or these. And I used those different kind of sounds alongside the main chop in order to create the sort of glitchy, weird texture that you can hear throughout the song. So that was it for the different chops. Now, of course, we're doing a hip-hop beat, so we need some. So those are the main drums, and there are two main elements to it, the main kick and the snare. And I'm going to explain those in a bit more detail, and then I'll go very quickly over the rest of the drums. So just the kick and the snare sound like this. Now I wanted to use my kick as a sub bass. So what I used is with Ableton's drum bus, there's this boom setting, and it basically adds a sub bass to your drums. And I really overdid it. I put the decay on 100%, so the decay is really long, boom 100%, a tiny bit of drive to have a bit of distortion. And then what I did is that I automated this setting here, the frequency of the sub bass. I automated this so that it follows the root note of the chords I was playing under it. So you can see here it's a D, but if I move over here, it's an A. And this is what gives the sub bass and the kick of the track. Now the snare was a bit easier. I just found a snare that I really liked. It's from Mr. Bill's sample pack. I just fine-tuned it so that it would be in key as well. And one easy way to do this is with Ableton Spectrum. You can see here that there's a grid with different notes. So this is C, and down there as well, it tells you what note you're playing. So this is D sharp, etc. And I knew I wanted the dominant of the track, which was an A. So it sounds like this. You can see here I set the spectrum to stay in a certain range because I just wanted to have the main frequency of the snare to pop up. And this is how I could fine tune it so that it hits the A440 perfectly. Now the rest of the drum sounds like this. And what I just did is that I layered whatever was in the top range of the spectrum. So for example, we have a shaker, we have some hi-hats, and I also took the same kick sample and turned it into a rhythm kick sort of that gives the rhythm to the whole beat. And this is the same kick as up there, but pitched up differently. So here, for example, you can see it's pitched up a bit, like 6 semitones, this one 10. And it gives a bit more drive and a bit more variety and details to the drums. Together with the main sample, we have something that sounds like this. And now, of course, it sounded a bit weak all by itself, so I decided to add a bit more instruments. There are 2 instruments in this track. The first one is a piano that plays through and through the entire thing, and it sounds like this. This is just Ableton's grand piano, quite bright and with a bit of reverb. And what I did is that I have this chain down there, which is a very, very small hit, like a little part of a kick. And this one triggers the sidechain compression on the piano. You can see it happen here. Every time this happens, there's some audio reduction applied to the piano. And this changes the attack of the piano at certain times. It plays the same rhythm as the kick and the snare, so it makes them pop up a little bit. And I thought it sounded nice through and through the track. At one other point in the track, there are some violins coming up. So the entire track is in D minor, and the relative major of D minor is F major. And I wanted to have a bit in major in the track to give it a bit more space and a bit more variety. And I decided to use violins for this. So I just used this free plugin called Sonatina Violins. You can find it free online, and I just added a lot of different effects, some OTT, some reverb, some compression, some saturation, still the same sidechain. But I wanted this to give a major feel to the track. Together, the 2 instruments sound like this. Now, lastly, I wanted to talk about the last drop because I did something to the violins that could make it a bit more interesting to listen to. So they sound like this. This is basically the same violins playing just higher notes with an LFO tool applied to it. So this cuts down the volume every 16th note, which is why the texture doesn't resemble a violin anymore. But I thought it was a really effective trick to use here. Now that's pretty much it as far as the creation of this track is concerned. I had a lot of fun doing it. Thank you so much for the recommendations. If you want to give me recommendations, go in the link in the description. Fill up the form and I will consider them. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.